Hey, welcome to Hannity. And tonight, the liberal mainstream media was so wrong and so misleading about President-elect Donald Trump and the election. Now, their biased reporting and their blatant disregard for the truth has now created this all-out anarchy from what I call the alt-radical left. Now, anti-democratic protesters are taking to the streets to carry out nationwide protests, while their leaders, well, they stay silent. President Obama, Hillary Clinton, billionaire George Soros, and other liberal leaders, they haven't said a thing to stop this out-of-control behavior. Now, their silence, it shouldn't come as a surprise. Why? Because Obama and Clinton and Soros for months now have worked to create and push false narratives about Donald Trump to try and scare you, the American voter. And what we're seeing now is what they purposely, in many ways, I argue, created. Remember, it wasn't too long ago when President Obama was saying all of this about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is temperamentally unfit to be commander-in-chief. We cannot elect a president who vilifies minorities, who mocks Americans with disabilities, who calls immigrants criminals and rapists. So Donald Trump is uniquely unqualified to hold this job.
Actually, you were uniquely unqualified for the job. Now, you also have people like outgoing Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid saying things like this about Donald Trump's election. Quote, white nationalists, Vladimir Putin and ISIS, they're celebrating Donald Trump's victory, while innocent, law-abiding Americans are racked with fear, especially African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Muslim Americans, LGBT Americans, and Asian Americans. Now, the leaders of the alt-radical left, as I call them, they've also stood by and applauded factions of this extreme movement. For example, they have embraced Black Lives Matter. Now, you may remember the group that repeatedly encouraged violence against our police officers. Remember them chanting, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now. Pigs in a blanket. Fry them like bacon." Now, instead of condemning Black Lives Matter, both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party embraced this group and their rhetoric. And Obama and Clinton, remember, they met with leaders of this group and openly praised them. The president invited them to the Oval Office. So let's be clear tonight. If we're going to talk about the people who are protesting Donald Trump, well, then we need to expose who is responsible for their behavior. Now, the outrage that we now see against President-elect Donald Trump and his supporters, this is getting dangerous and extremely scary. Twitter tonight and over the weekend and since the election has been flooded with violent threats against Donald Trump and his family. We're also seeing Trump supporters. They're coming under attack. Now, according to the Chicago Tribune, just one day after the election, there was a man in the Windy City who was viciously beaten by an angry mob after getting in a traffic incident because they assumed he was a Trump supporter. And we've got to warn you, this video is beyond disturbing. Take a look.
Yeah, he voted Trump! Yeah! I gotta do that to yeah. Don't vote Trump! Don't vote Trump! Don't vote Trump! Yeah, did it. Still in split. Hey, y'all be gone though. Hey, take the lighter, shot.
Unbelievable. Now, the Chicago Tribune also reported that the man did, in fact, vote for Mr. Trump, but that he never told the attackers about it, so they just assumed he was a Trump supporter. Now, could you imagine if that happened to a person who voted for Hillary Clinton? Democrats, the media, they would be up in arms. It would be on the front page of every single newspaper all over the country, all over TV. But because the man pulled the lever for Trump, well, they don't seem to care. And if you think this is bad, I have news for you tonight, America. It's only going to get worse. I wish I was wrong. Now, according to Politico, George Soros and other super rich liberals that donated to Hillary Clinton are now meeting to come up with a plan to fight back and try and stop Donald Trump. Now, to be the abusively biased liberal mainstream media, well, that's the New York Times, perhaps the most anti-Trump media outlet around. They're now trying to apologize to their readers after being so wrong, quote, after such an erratic and unpredictable election, there are inevitable questions. Did Donald Trump's sheer unconventionality, and did that lead us to other news outlets to underestimate his support among American voters? Now, the Times, CNN, and the rest of the liberal media, well, they can apologize all they want, but guess what? they're the ones going back to, before Trump decided to run, they were the ones that saying this is an impossibility. They got it wrong from the get-go. Watch this.
Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke.
Do it. Do it. Look at me. Do it. I will personally write you a campaign check now on behalf of this country, which does not want you to be president, but which badly wants you to run.
This man has got some momentum, and we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket.
Next, I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on to write it down.
Sorry to laugh.
Which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones, right now, Donald Trump.
Mr. Trump, to answer your call for political honesty, I just want to say you're not going to be president, all right? It's been fun.
President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. Well, at real Donald Trump. At least I will go down as a president.
Yeah, so will Donald Trump. Now, we also can't forget how WikiLeaks, how they exposed rampant collusion between the media and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Now, the abusively biased press, well, they have created what I call an informational crisis here in America. And in doing so, by the way, they did you, the American people, a great disservice. Now, back in 2008, right here on this program, I said journalism was dead. Now, because of the free press and the pass they gave Barack Obama. But this election, we found out it's far worse than we ever could have imagined. We now know that the interim DNC chairwoman, Donna Brazile, while working for CNN, well, she was giving the Clinton campaign multiple debate questions. CNN asked the DNC, hey, what questions should we ask Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and Carly Fiorina during their interviews? Really? Asking the DNC for the questions? Reporters, well, they asked the Clinton campaign for approval before publishing their stories. I wish they'd do that to me. They never give me that opportunity. So-called journalists allowed to campaign to edit quotes. Pretty amazing. CNBC's John Horowitz, see right there? Well, he was offering campaign advice, bragging about going after Trump in a debate that he actually moderated. And to top it all off, WikiLeaks exposed how dozens of journalists from every major organization except the Fox News Channel were invited to eat dinner at Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta's house. You have Jeff Zucker's stenographer, you know that little pipsqueak, Brian Stelter over at CNN, obsessed. He's a stalker of the Fox News Channel. Well, he actually said this weekend it was time for the media to do some soul searching. Hey, Brian, that's a great idea. You can start right there at CNN. Now, putting all of this aside for now, 1 week ago, I gave you my closing arguments about this most pivotal election, and you, the American people, you cut through the clutter and you came through because you want to save your country. The media, the pollsters, the politicians, the global elites, they never saw what you saw, what I saw, and that's Donald Trump's potential, his sweeping victory that was coming. But you saw it, and you know why you saw it? Because there was so much at stake. Now, the president-elect, Donald Trump, he needs to avoid what's coming. That's being pressured by the Washington establishment. He's got to always remember, this is my advice for Mr. Trump, always remember, it's the American people that put you in office. And that's why I would like the president-elect and what I want him to do, and I think we're going to have to hold him accountable. He made many promises during this campaign. My advice, Mr. Trump, keep your promises. Donald Trump's agenda is very straightforward. To succeed, I argue, all he has to do is follow through on the agenda. Repealing, replacing Obamacare with free market ideas and solutions like healthcare savings accounts. Why? To lower costs and give you, the American people, real choice. Lowering taxes. Smart idea. Half of the American people won't pay federal income taxes under Donald Trump's plan. cut personal income, and cut corporate taxes. Why? To make America more competitive with the rest of the world. I talked about repatriating corporate profits. Allow these companies to bring back the trillions of dollars that are being held overseas. Offer that 10% low rate in exchange for investment and job creation. By the way, I have an addition to Donald Trump's proposal. If he's going to allow this money back in, he's going to give us a corporate tax rate of 15%, allow the repatriated money back in at 10%. I say go one step further. Any company that will bring millions of dollars and specifically invest in states and cities like Ohio, Milwaukee, Detroit, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, you know what? Incentivize them. Give them 7.5% a repatriation rate. Let's get those jobs flowing immediately if possible. Also, Donald Trump promised a border wall, stop illegal immigration, and to stop illegals from driving down the wages and competing for the few jobs that are available. He promised to appoint originalist justices to the Supreme Court, people like Scalia and Clarence Thomas, who believe in the Constitution, co-equal branches of government, separation of powers. He also talked about a New Deal for Black America, fixing our inner cities. I would say President-elect Trump, he needs to enact this New Deal with African Americans to help end crime, create jobs, fight poverty and despair, and give these kids the education they deserve. Energy independence, to me, is very, very important. Open up drilling and fracking, approve the Keystone XL pipeline, cut regulations on all of these issues. And one of the more important things, drain the swamp. Shrink government, slash wasteful government spending, put in term limits for Congress, address our massive national debt, identify our enemies for who they are. Say the words radical Islam, which I know you probably will. We need to start vetting refugees. I support the idea of safe zones, but we got to stop the flow of refugees and migrants from countries, especially those that have radical views that are the antithesis of our constitutional values. One of the more important things that doesn't get a lot of discussion, send education back to the states. End Common Core, top down, federal government regulated education. Let local communities, towns, and cities and states decide. Now, I would start with the inner cities first. Why? We have abandoned and hurt minority Americans. They have been disproportionately impacted more than anybody else, especially with the bad educational system. Last point, negotiating free and fair trade. No more cutting deals that negatively impact American workers and causes job losses here at home. And the last thing, to me, this election was about the forgotten man. And if you create millions of jobs in places that put you in power, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, where industry is left and it have decimated entire cities, to me, that's what the next 4 years need to be about. We will, on this program, hold Donald Trump accountable to those promises. And if he gets the job done, I believe we'll be a better country. If he doesn't, we'll be a loud voice of opposition.